top 32 as well. But it does feel better if you're just there, you can get the win, and you can just make it forward, not having to worry about how resistance is going to play a role. So we're just waiting to lock that in, and we'll get right in the game.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm curious about is whether or not Marco decides to lead the Salazzle. I think like Talonflame is a likely lead from Brady's end to kind of prioritize setting up that Tailwind. But with the open team sheet format, we know that the Talonflame, no Covert Cloak, no Ghost Terra, but it has Protect, and so you can very easily just Protect on turn 1 with Talonflame and whatever other Pokemon you're sending in, then set up Tailwind on turn 2 to ensure that you're not broken with the fake out from Salazzle. So let's see if Salazzle hits the field. I'd love to see him make an appearance.
All right, well, I don't think you're going to get your wish this time around because Marco is going to be leading with the Baxcalibur and the Tauros. And for Brady, Hyper Offense right away. You've got the Garchomp and the Talonflame ready to go.
Yeah, I'd say this is a fairly nice lead for Marco, right? You get an Intimidate onto both of these physical attackers, and there is some offensive pressure here right now onto the opposing side, but I think Intimidate in itself is a really big deal, and Baxcalibur has the ability to potentially go for boosts right now as well. It is, I believe, the Swords Dance set. And so, yeah, the question here is, you know, Brady's got to be a little bit worried, right? You're facing something like you just Ice Shard you immediately, and so, yeah, you can see him kind of opting for a defensive pivot into Golden Go, which I think makes a lot of sense. I think Golden Go is actually very, very good against both of these Pokemon because just neither of them really have super good coverage into it. But I think since Marco has kind of the early lead advantage, you maybe make some predictions and continue to elevate his lead.
Yeah, I mean, the Golden Go definitely feels like a safe switch here. Not going to be taking any damage from a close combat from the Tauros, and maybe get a bit of priority as well. But it looks like Marco's just going to go ahead and go for a Terrastalize here. The Baxcalibur now going to change over to that Water Terra type. And we'll see where it goes from there. I mean, it has a couple of moves that are in its moveset, like Glaive Rush and Ice Shard, which are going to be doing a lot of damage, but it's that Brave Bird into the Protect that at least, you know, Brady's able to get the Golden Go in pretty safe here, depending on what the Baxcalibur is going to do, but that's scary.
There's the Swords Dance, and so yeah, committing the Water Terror early just to make sure like Garchomp doesn't just hit it with the Dragon Claw. Even with the Intimidate, Dragon Claw can still hurt a decent amount. And yeah, Water Terror is really nice for Baxcalibur, covers for, you know, especially like the Steel weakness to Golden Go here. And so even though turn 1, it's not like a Dragon Claw came out, having that kind of defensive ability against this Baxcalibur, or against this Golden Go on the second turn is fairly valuable. Now the thing is, the Baxcalibur's moveset is Ice Shard, Glaive Rush, Swords Dance, and Protect. So even at +2, like you're not necessarily picking up a knockout onto Golden Go, but at least Golden Go can't knock you out in return.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, at this point, you're just kind of hoping that you can withstand some of this pressure. And as you highlighted, I mean, Brady really is going to be relying on the Golden Go and the Garchomp to really dish out the majority of the damage that we're seeing on his team. So Marco's kind of starting to respect that and really looking at those to be the targets of most of his damage. But Talonflame gonna Terrastalize, and it has the Flying Terra type, so if it goes for anything like the Brave Bird, it will be able to do increased damage there with that same type attack bonus added on top. It still doesn't do very much because it was right into the Golden Go, but if it had been that Tauros, I don't think we would have seen that one survive. The Glaive Rush, though, right into the Talonflame, does look like that's going to be a bit too much for that bird to handle, so it's going to go back into its Pokeball.
Yeah, it's interesting because Brady kind of just went all in on trying to KO the Tauros there, get a little bit of extra damage output, but it's a great nasty plot from Golden Go. One other important speed interaction there was the Golden Go moving after the Baxcalibur, so that's good to keep in mind. But yeah, you just committed your Terra for 20% on Golden Go, and it makes sense because you're trying to cover for, you know, the Tauros, but now like Tauros can actually switch back in, can get an Intimidate onto the Garchomp. I am curious kind of the bit between the damage calcs from like the Golden Go versus the Baxcalibur. I think right now Baxcalibur could consider just going for like a Protect this turn. You could pivot the Golden Go back out into the Tauros, get an Intimidate onto the Garchomp. It's actually Focus Sash on Garchomp on Brady's end, so an Ice Shard won't just get a one-hit knockout onto it. That's a pretty big deal. But one interesting thing here is like Garchomp can't feel very comfortable clicking Earthquake right now unless you actually go for a Protect with the Golden Go, and there's Baxcalibur starting the turn off with that Protect.
Yep. So we'll see that come through, and also another Protect coming out from the Golden Go. So what's really going to happen here when 3 Pokemon on the field are using Protect right now? Brady was definitely trying to go for some damage there with the Earthquake, but doesn't really feel like a viable option anymore either, knowing that unless he wants to sacrifice his own Golden Go to try to get the knockout onto both of Marco's Pokemon, yeah, the protects have been used. Getting a second one, not super likely.
Yeah, I think that's a really just safe and smart play for Marco's then, and now Marco actually has the ability to just like double up into the Golden Go slot. I think like Garchomp's not actually really that scary right now, and the Golden Go obviously set up Nasty Plot earlier. One of the things we saw, I think, was that Marco's Golden Go was actually able to protect first before Brady's Golden Go, and so, you know, implying that it you know, it could of course be a speed tie, but both players should know how the Golden Goes are trained, and so, yeah, since the Terra was committed on Talonflame, you can just, I would, you know, personally think about doubling up onto the opposing Golden Go and just try to knock it out here. But maybe you're confident a Shadow Ball from your Marco's Golden Go will just get the KO, so you could just Ice Shard, Garchomp, Shadow Ball into Golden Go, or double up into it if you really want to ensure the knockout.
Well, Garchomp's just going to go ahead and make a quick switch here as Amoonguss now entering onto the field here for Brady. So a little bit of defensive support, but I mean, even just from the Baxcalibur, it still takes that pretty handedly. The Shadow Ball now coming out from Marco's Golden Go is actually not enough to deal the finishing blow, and so Golden Go gets to shoot off a Shadow Ball of its own and a critical hit, knocking out that Baxcalibur. So both Terra for both players now removed from the field, and I think you're feeling pretty good about that trade, if you know, just making sure that Baxcalibur's off.
Yeah, I was curious how much, you know, Shadow Ball's supposed to do against Baxcalibur there without the critical hit, because Baxcalibur is actually just a really bulky Pokemon.
We had a nasty plot too.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, like I was thinking it could even survive a +2 Shadow Ball, depending on how it's trained. But honestly, I'm not entirely sure there. Because if it survives, I think the game's just over, right? You could just very safely Ice Shard Amoonguss, Shadow Ball, Golden Go again.
True.
I guess then, I mean, it's not 100% over, because then Brady could like protect Amoonguss, pivot in Garchomp, and then or sacrifice Golden Go, bring in Garchomp. But that being said, yeah, the critical hit just ensures that the knockout happens, and Hydreigon's actually here in the back, and that has that Heat Wave, which is really tough to deal with right now with no defensive potential, you know, Terras from Brady's end. So yeah, committing the Flying Terra on Talonflame so early on, I think really limits Brady's options from this point on. And there's also just kind of an inherent speed advantage for Marco right now with his Pokemon relative to Brady's, which is a really big deal.
Yeah, we did see that Marco's Golden Go is indeed faster. It's happened a few times now.
Oh, Heat Wave is going to miss, though.
Oh my gosh, Golden Go misses the attack.
But it was on Golden Go, and I think a Shadow Ball here should still get the knockout, so little bit of drama, but I don't think it's actually going to end up mattering.
I mean, hey, maybe Shadow Ball misses too. That's not how that works, but it's still maybe a little bit of hope there. I did see the miss, I got a little excited, but now light at the end of the tunnel. Garchomp is
there.
It's still healthy, and it can fire off Earthquakes without too much worry.
Yeah, I think like the problem is now you have to face the opposing Intimidate, and you know you can just like pivot Golden Go out and Tauros.
I'm trying to find a silver lining, Aaron. Stop raining on my parade.
I think right now, you know, Brady's just gotta take a little bit. I'm sure he's thinking a lot about the Flying Terra, right? I think that just
for sure.
Terra can be so hard to utilize, and he went all in, saying, okay, Tauros is kind of annoying. No switch, actually, so it's just going to be Dragon Claw coming out. I'm actually kind of surprised to see that, but maybe Marco's saying, well, I have enough resources to win this game anyway. But yeah, I think, I don't know, Shadow Ball here certainly is not going to knock out the Garchomp, and that's actually not even a 2-hit knockout. So Tauros will come back out. You will get that Intimidate off. I think I would have maybe liked to see the Tauros switch in, but I guess like it's still so healthy, so.
I think it's okay. I mean, Tauros also has access to Aqua Jet, so you know that priority is going to help Marco secure a knockout onto the Garchomp now. But in fact, wow, Earthquake's going to move first, but yeah, Tauros so deals with that so well.
Yeah, the only thing I was thinking was if you open yourself up to the opportunity of losing to like a double critical hit there, but I don't even know if Tauros would have fainted to a critical hit. It's not even like Life Forward Choice Band Garchomp, it's just Focus Sash. And so, yeah, Marco's just going to take this first game, honestly, very convincingly.
Yeah, it was super well played by him. I mean, just looking at how he was able to pivot around some of Brady's biggest threats, there are definitely some adjustments that Brady can make going into the second game, but overall, I think he actually got a lot of information, just knowing that the Talonflame, even with the Terra flying, wasn't able to get the knockout with the Brave Bird is really good information. Maybe as well, knowing that Marco's Golden Go is in fact faster, might lean Brady towards going for Tailwind with the Talonflame instead of trying to get damage with it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I feel like Brady just like had a major disadvantage for that mid and end game in game one because, yeah, you're just slower, right? And Talonflame, like, spent all of this time going for Brave Birds that had very, very little value. And so I definitely expect if Talonflame comes back out to prioritize Tailwind this time around, so I think that's a really good call out. I think you could go with the same Pokemon. You know, I was saying earlier how I think like Rotom would make a lot of sense in this matchup, and you just go like full offense. And so like the Amoonguss felt not very strong there. Unfortunately, Salazzle did not come out in that last matchup, but I think Marco, you know, just bringing strong Pokemon, I think like you have a lot of offense immediately from the get-go. I think the way like he utilized that early Swords Dance with Excalibur was really nice because Glaive Rush and Ice Shard just honestly do so much damage, even before the Swords Dance, but especially afterwards. And so, yeah, I think Marco definitely has a lot of room for flexibility. I think with Brady, the one adjustment maybe you consider is dropping Amoonguss and bringing Rotom instead. And then also, yeah, when you're actually in the game, the main adjustment you called out, which I agree with, is, yeah, just prioritize setting up Tailwind this time around.
Let's see the leads for game number 2, where Marco has a game lead in this best of 3 series, so needs to win here in order to secure a top spot in that top 32. It'll be Excalibur and Tauros here for Marco, and it'll be the Golden Go and the Talonflame once again here for Brady.
Yeah, I think like adjusting to Golden Go here is smart because last time like Garchomp was out on the field, it just like feels forced to switch out, needs up and Intimidate. Golden Go this time around can like pressure immediately with Make It Rain, can consider actually going for a nasty plot as well on Brady's side of the field. And so, yeah, I think it's a good adjustment. I feel like Marco won the lead matchup really, really hard last time around. You can't just let him get away with that this time.
Yeah, so maybe just going for some speed control here. And the Golden Go as well is really not being pressured down by the Excalibur or the Tauros. I mean, like Tauros, one of its strongest moves is going to be that close combat, but that's not something that Golden Go cares about with the immunity to those fighting type attacks. But it is time for a Terra. So we're going to Terrasilize that Excalibur, and we'll see it transform back into that water type.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think like Excalibur is just one of those Pokemon that you often want to Terra immediately because there's so many Pokemon that can hit for super effective damage. And so there's the Tailwind that you
it's an ice type.
Called out. Rosemary just has an agenda against ice type Pokemon.
No, it's not me. It's not me. They are just the rarest one in the game. But yeah, there's the Tailwind. The Raging Bull as well, just gonna go ahead and knock out the Talonflame. But honestly, I feel like Talonflame did its job. It set the Tailwind. Brady gets a free switch now for something else offensive that can use that Tailwind to great effect. But even though we see the Excalibur go for the Swords Dance again, I think you feel pretty okay just being able to bring in one of the offensive threats that Brady has in the back, and there's that Rotom you called out.
Yeah, Rotom makes a big difference here because like earlier the problem was how do you actually beat Excalibur? Now you have an electric type Pokemon that can actually just Thunderbolt the Excalibur, which is really cool. And so this is completely different, right? This time around there's speed control, you've baited out the Terra on the opposing end, and you have a Pokemon that can actually hit Excalibur for way more. Like the problem was Amoonguss just didn't feel like it out-contributed very much in the previous battle, so really love to see the Rotom adjustment here. Running a very classic moveset of Thunderbolt. Hydro Pump Willow has been protect, but I think here you can consider just going for, there are a lot of things you can consider, and Brady's actually like thinking about going for a double nasty plot, which I think is intriguing. I think the other route you could take is just go maybe like Terra and Make It Rain and then just Thunderbolt immediately, but yeah, I think certainly multiple options. I think Shadow Ball also fine here. So the question is whether or not you want to get a little bit greedy here, but it's interesting. I think we're seeing a potential Steel Terra from Rotom.
I think we are as well. Okay, Tauros is going to switch off the field here for Marco. Golden Go now taking its place. We saw how Brady was selecting those moves, but it is going to be that Terra. So Rotom Wash here is going to Terrasilize over to the Steel type, and well, it's not going to help it do any additional damage with the moveset that it has. It does help it out a bit defensively here, especially when you're staring down a Excalibur that did just Swords Dance in front of you.
Yeah, it's really nice defensively, right? Because now neither Glaive Rush or Ice Shard really will do too much to you. And so Thunderbolt comes out, and there's just the Make It Rain. So yeah, I really, really like how Brady has been playing this game so far, and I think he's super well positioned because now Make It Rain does so much into the Golden Go. The next turn you can consider just going for another Make It Rain plus Thunderbolt. Oh, although actually because Marco does have the Citrus Berry on Golden Go, maybe you're more incentivized to click Shadow Ball here instead. But nicely done on Brady's end, kind of predicts the potential protect from the opposing end, catches Golden Go as it switches in and just does a ton of damage to it. You know Excalibur protected, so now it's fairly easy to just, yeah, you could like double up onto it with a Shadow Ball and a Thunderbolt, try to guarantee a KO onto that or whatever is switching in. But you could also, of course, launch the Shadow Ball into the opposing Golden Go as well, try to get the knockout there, or go for Make It Rain. Once again, plenty of options in terms of what you want to do with Golden Go. I don't really expect Thunderbolt to KO Excalibur here, but I can't say I know my Rotom into Excalibur calc super well.
No, okay, yeah, it's pretty bulky. Yeah, definitely pretty bulky there, but the double up feels really safe as well, knowing the defensive capabilities of the duo that Brady has on the field. So you knock out the Baxcalibur, and then what does Marco's Golden Go do to you? I mean, the Shadow Ball comes through, but we even saw before that Brady's Golden Go was able to survive that.
Yep.
So yes, it's gonna get a special defense drop, so that's not going to be too long for this world, but at least you know that Brady was going to be able to survive that. So very, very safe to go for the knockout there.
Yeah, and I feel like, once again, it's just like a mix of Tailwind plus a better lead this time that's made this game look completely different from the previous one. I think the Rotom adjustment was much needed here as well, right? Being able to actually hit Baxcalibur for super effective is really nice, and so it was really the perfect two adjustments, you know, one in terms of Pokemon choice and two in terms of how you execute with Talonflame. And so right now it feels like Brady has a considerable lead, and I'm just trying to think, how can Marco really get back into this? Maybe it's like stalling out the Tailwind and close combat, like then it's actually super effective into the Rotom, for example. So you could just go for some protects at the current moment.
Well, he still has the Tailwind available, if I'm not mistaken. I think this might be one of the last turns of Tailwind, so you feel pretty safe to swap out the Golden Go, who did get a special attack drop. And despite whether or not the Tauros does protect, either you get your Garchomp in for relatively free, or if it tries to knock out your Golden Go, then you know, Rotom's going to hit it with a Thunderbolt. So either way, it feels like a really good turn for Brady to be able to position this Garchomp in, and they can go for Earthquakes pretty free right now if it really wanted to.
Yeah, it looks like actually opting for the Dragon Claw option here, saying, well, you know, your Golden Go's not really that scary anyway, and ooh, okay, Golden Go actually even makes the switch out here. So it makes a lot of sense because the Tauros, I think, pressures Rotom with close combat now that Rotom is Steel Terra, so you kind of want to just ensure that you knock it out. Dragon Claw just does a little bit more, but oh, Tauros is just going to outspeed Rotom and get a one-hit KO onto it.
Okay, well, that definitely doesn't feel too good. I could have totally been misremembering the amount of Tailwind turns that were left as well. But that Rotom is getting knocked out, and all of a sudden, Marco is going to have the, you know, the full HP Hydreigon. You've got the Tauros on the field as well. You're just kind of hoping that your Golden Go is going to be enough to be able to get through all of this. Garchomp is still pretty fast, so it will still be able to dish out some pretty big damage onto either the Hydreigon or the Tauros, but it would be a 3-hit knockout if it's going to continue to try to hit into the Tauros. Wait, no. Close combat.
But I think one thing that's interesting here is, like, do you consider switching out Tauros? The Hydreigon here does actually have Protect, right? So you can pivot Tauros out and then bring it back in for an Intimidate, help survive that Dragon Claw a little bit better. Honestly, kind of surprised Brady was willing to just give up Rotom to a potential close combat there, but I guess maybe doesn't feel super comfortable, like, making the hard switch into Golden Go there. But yeah, I think this is also awkward because Garchomp is really limited in terms of what attack you can really go for here. You know, if you click Earthquake, you're more or less either forced to target yourself, and then it kind of forces like the Protect from your own Golden Go, right? But yeah, this is kind of the play I was talking about, Protect, and just kind of bring in Golden Go. Maybe you get an attack off with it, but the idea is so that you can pivot Tauros back in and then just get an Intimidate off onto the opposing Garchomp, and that goes such a long way. Yeah,
I mean, we've seen a few different strategies, and like it just not it being, it wasn't as fast-paced as maybe we would have expected to see some of these matches to go so far today. But this game is no exception, where we've seen expert pivoting coming in from Marco. And yes, you lose the Golden Go here, but as you had mentioned, Tauros gets to come back in, get another Intimidate drop onto the Garchomp, and the Hydreigon as well. I mean, that might help it survive like a Dragon Claw coming in for the Garchomp despite its super effective nature. That's something to definitely consider here too.
Yeah, this turn's really interesting to me because, like, do you actually potentially go for a Protect on one of these two Pokemon? Looks like Brady's actually thinking about just attacking with both, which, so here's a Dragon Claw, okay.
Oh yeah, that hangs on. Wow, the close combat as well going into the Garchomp, it's still going to be able to keep itself relatively healthy. But the defense drop as well, and the special defense drop is really what makes me interested on how this Golden Go is going to maybe attack.
Oh!
Wow! It actually holds on from that Heat Wave.
That's
so,
what, yeah, oh my goodness,
what?
And that's the double knockout. That's one thing I was wondering about, because if Golden Go just faints there, I think then, you know, Marco should just win the game, because then you can either, you can close combat and Draco Meteor into the Garchomp. So Leftovers was such a huge item for Golden Go in this one, allowing it to continuously heal back just for a little bit, and it had exactly enough
like
HP there.
Leftover heal. Finally!
Yep. And so, wow, that was super intense. I felt like Brady had a pretty sizable lead, but then the Tauros just kind of close combated the Rotom for a one-hit knockout, and I was like, oh, wait, how is this looking? But Brady in the end had enough resources and enough damage output to get the win. And yeah, I think Rotom was really pivotal in this one to just put on a little bit more pressure in the early game.
Yeah, well, I like its steel terrestrialization. I thought that was really cool, but then also just keeping in mind that this is the second game in a row that Marco has terrestrialized that Baxcalibur to be water type, and then also has brought that Aqua Breed Tauros. Yeah, you may as well bring the Rotom. I feel like it's definitely a necessary Pokemon to have in this matchup, and so it was cool to see how Brady was able to position around that.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking from Marco's end, is there any room to bring the Salazzle or the Amoonguss? Like, once again, Salazzle is interesting, but I think a lot of its appeal is that it's really good into Amoonguss and Grimmsnarl, and Brady has clearly like deprioritized bringing those Pokemon, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a run back with the same four, but maybe just kind of different leads, right? Mix things up a little bit here. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I could see Marco going with one of the two Pokemon he hasn't brought out so far, but I don't know exactly just how good they are for him, and then you'd be dropping one of your top 4 Pokemon here. So it's going to be Tauros and Golden Goat here to start.
All right, Tauros and Golden Go, and then Rotom and Golden Go. So this is a little bit more unique here for the choices, but like the fact that it's going to be Marco leading with the Tauros in front of 2 special attackers, you know, you're really hoping that Intimidate drop is going to end up hitting something more impactful like the Garchomp that Marco was pivoting around before. But this does leave Brady pretty available to go for some attacks here. Maybe not even try to go for that nasty plot setup.
Yeah, I really just respect how like Brady has made so many different adjustments in terms of leads, and I feel like game 1 Marco had a really nice lead, but this time around I feel like Brady, both in game 2 and game 3, it's gone a little bit more in his favor. So there's Hydreigon coming out immediately, and of course that will be able to pressure with crits, but you need to spend a turn to actually get that focus energy up.
Yeah, so let's see if it'll take this Thunderbolt. Probably pretty fine there. It's not going to be super effective. And the Shadow Ball as well, just going to go ahead right into that Golden Ghost Protect. So, you know what? Marco does get a chance to pivot this Hydreigon in, but where does he go from here?
That is a great question, because it's like, are you willing to go for the focus energy immediately? Because if so, you leave yourself obviously vulnerable to taking some damage. Now, the upside is that it's like leftovers Golden Go. It's not like Life Orb or Choice Specs, and Rotom doesn't really have much damage for Hydreigon. So like, you could actually conceivably go for it, focus energy here, saying, okay, even if you attack me with attacks this upcoming turn, I'm not going to faint, but it's just going to be Draco Meteor immediately into the Talonflame. You don't necessarily need to go for the focus energy, right? Draco Meteor itself is still just a really strong option. So, I mean, that's a really big deal. Talonflame is eliminated, and that means no Tailwind, and Tailwind was so critical, I feel like, it's part of the game plan in the previous one. Now it's just a Shadow Ball coming out as well, and that's decent damage onto this Rotom.
No, it really is just all offensive options here for Brady. Yeah, not having the Tailwind setup feels really impactful to this game number 3, but Rotom's not doing meaningless damage. You know, it's still being able to get some chip down onto both the Hydreigon and the Golden Go in these past few turns. And the Garchomp can go for an Earthquake here if it wants. I mean, it's not going to affect the Rotom. Obviously, you don't want that to be the case, but the Hydreigon as well is something that's going to not be on the receiving end of that either.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think now what is really interesting is there's still multiple Pokemon in the back from Marco's end, right? And so, like, I am curious really what is remaining, but either way, I think knocking out Talonflame is honestly a huge relief there. And I like Marco's play of just Dracoing and Shadow Balling. I wouldn't be surprised if it were a double up into like the Golden Ghost slot, and it works out even better because Talonflame ends up just switching in. So kind of baiting more Dracos here. And yep, there this time around it is just going to be a Draco into the Golden Ghost. So very nice bait by Brady to bring in his Golden Ghost. But the problem is it's not like Rotom is really doing that much damage right now anyway. And if anything, yeah, now you just activated Citrus Berry. And so I think Brady's still in a really difficult position in this current moment.
Yeah, I mean, with the Shadow Ball follow-up here too into the Golden Go, we saw that this is able to hang on before because of the damage calculations that we've seen, but it comes down to whether or not this Golden Go is going to be able to do anything in terms of damage output in these following few turns. The leftover ceiling has been really good. It could cycle through a Protect if it wants to, but it comes down to that speed. Is it fast enough to be able to deal damage to Marco's side of the field before it gets knocked out? And the answer that we know so far is no.
Yeah, and this has just been tough. I like Rotom is just stuck in a really awkward position where like you just get no value really out of most of your moves, or very minimal value, I should say, right? And, like Thunderbolt into Golden Go feels like a decently powerful attack that did like 25%-ish or so. And so I feel like Brady is slowly just losing so much momentum as like he's not able to deal much damage. He's forced to constantly make these switches. And there's the focus energy. So now you can ignore those special attack drops via the Draco Meteors, and it's going to just be Hydro Pump into Hydreigon, so get a little bit of chip damage onto it. But yeah, like Marco's just getting so much more damage each turn relative to Brady.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're forced to be on the back foot, playing a bit more defensively, that's valuable time that you're taking away from being able to actually get off any meaningful attacks. And at this point, you're hopeful that the Garchomp is in a position for Brady that you'll be able to deal with this Hydreigon before it starts to get critical hits onto your team. But we'll see if it gets there. It's going to be a Terra type, though. Brady has not had a chance to Terrastalize yet, so it'll be the Garchomp receiving that for the Fire type.
Yep, and Fire Garchomp, you know, fairly common to cover for mainly the Ice weakness, but also, you know, you just no longer take super effective damage from Dragon-type attacks, for example, which is a good deal. So no switches here. It's actually just going to be a straight Dragon Claw into the Hydreigon for a knockout.
And that too, you know, what can the Golden Go really do here as well to be able to pressure down that Garchomp?
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess maybe you don't need to worry about that now, because Golden Go does get paralyzed here, is still able to fire off a Shadow Ball, but Rotom gets brought down just slow enough to be able to make use of its Citrus Berry there too. So you're getting yourself extra lives here for this Rotom.
There's Baxcalibur, but Baxcalibur doesn't match up as well into Garchomp given the Fire Terra. That being said, you know, you can still deal damage, and one thing I was thinking about was whether or not, you know, instead of Thunderbolting Golden Go, it could have been more worthwhile to Hydro Pump it. But now with the Para, it's like Golden Go's stuck in a really awkward position where can't really do much other than, you know, get maybe one more attack off, but you're at risk of just getting outsped on the opposing end, and it is, you know, especially with the paralysis. And so with the Fire Terra on Garchomp as well, you know, you're not weak to the Ice Shard from Baxcalibur anymore, which is a really big deal, because otherwise, like, Ice Shard would be a huge, huge pain to deal with. And so we're in the classic scenario where I'm like thinking, okay, who's going to protect, and are you going to call that protect correctly? Because I think if you just attack with both Pokemon here, given the deficit, it's not going to work out super well for Brady. And he is coming close to timer there, but locks it in.
All right, well, Golden Go is being switched off the field here from Marco in favor of the Tauros, just hoping that Intimidate drop is going to be enough to help mitigate some of the damage output of this Garchomp, and maybe so it can take an attack in that Golden Go stead. But we're also going to see a Terrastalize on Marco's side, so that Baxcalibur getting changed over to a Water type. Maybe that's going to be enough to keep this Baxcalibur in the game.
Yeah, so once again, kind of the defensive Terras that we've seen with this Pokemon. And so, yeah, Earthquake naturally makes sense as an option here. It's just consistent damage. It's, you know, I say consistent, but that felt kind of sad, to be honest.
Maybe a little bit. Oh, but the Glaive Rush there is going to get the knockout onto the Rotom before it does get a chance to fire off an attack. And so now it's just that Golden Go and that Garchomp here for Brady. And Marco still has 3 Pokemon remaining. I would say maybe 2.5. That Golden Go probably won't get a chance to attack just based on where that paralysis puts it in terms of speed tier.
Yeah, it's just been really tough. I feel like Brady has just not been able to actually deal very much damage. A part of it was like having Rotom out on the field when it wasn't able to actually really threaten, like Hydreigon, for example. And so, yeah, I think Marco is just played this very cleanly, and I think getting the like Draco Meteors and just like one-shotting Talonflame as it was switching in was really, really nice, and then just being able to constantly like double up and pick up knockouts quickly was a really big deal. And so, you know, Brady kind of opting not to maybe lead the Talonflame here, doesn't get that Tailwind up, and part of the natural problem is that the Golden Go on Brady's side is just kind of slow, and so gets outsped by a lot of things on the opposing end when there's no Tailwind being set up.
I think what's tough too is that, you know, now that Garchomp has Terrastalized to fire, you still have that problem of the Aqua Breed Tauros across from you.
Yep.
You know, how does Garchomp really withstand some of that damage output too? But the Golden Go maybe gets a chance to fire off an attack, but Brady's Golden Go feels very slow.
Yeah,
in comparison to the rest of the field.
I was gonna say I just don't really know how you get back into this one. To be honest, you already called out the really good point. Like yeah, you like now by turning into fire, you're just weak into the Toro slot, and the Golden Go is just not really doing like that much damage without a nasty plot boost as well. And so yeah, I mean Brady can try his best, but this game feels more or less over. But hey, a Dragon Ball crit could make things interesting.
Not going to be a crit, though, and so it will be the Raging Bull into the Golden Go.
No,
that'll be a crit, though. Okay, Aaron, you called it for the wrong side here if you wanted a game number 3. But that does leave Excalibur to go for the Glaive Rush. It's still going to do so much damage. And with that final knockout onto Brady's Garchomp, Marco Martinez takes this final best of 3 here on day number 1 of Swiss for the San Diego Regionals. He's going to go 8-2 now and guarantee himself in the top 32.
Yeah, I really like watching Marco's team. I think just, running both the Scope Lens on the Hydreigon as well as the Swords Dance Excalibur. Excalibur honestly felt really impressive in that set, like being able to boost up with Swords Dance and just, always have constant pressure. And yeah, I think like part of the issue with Brady is like just lost a lot of Pokemon with very little gain. Like switching in Talonflame and then just not getting any value out of it, like it doesn't feel great. But I think a lot of it was kind of dictated by the lead matchup and really how you respond to the opposing lead.
Yeah, I mean, it's always so tough because, I super respect how Brady was able to play around with all of the different leads and options that he had available to himself. But at the end of the day, I felt like Marco really was prepared to see maybe some of the more interesting leads that I guess he could have seen from this team and really did identify what the biggest threats on Brady's team are going to be.
I feel like Marco just had like generally more damage output at any given point as well. And I don't know, part of it is if you look at Brady's team, like Rotom was such an interesting pick because it is really good, of course, into that water Excalibur, but it honestly does very, very little to some